I've always kept my personal life separate from business. But that day, one request cut straight through everything I thought I had under control. It didn't come from an investor. It didn't come from someone weak. It came from a woman the entire system respects. And who was scared. I thought it would be simple. Just a favor. I thought I'd step in, help out, and walk away untouched. I didn't. The first time I saw Brooklyn, those defiant eyes, that bottled up anger in a wheelchair, I knew I'd crossed a line I could never uncross, and that phone call was about to rewrite my entire story. If this video found its way to you, it's because something in it was meant for you. This is a fictional story, created for entertainment, but the emotions, the conflicts, and the choices, they're real. Hit like, subscribe for more stories, and tell me where you're watching from and how old you are. All right, let's keep going. The meeting with the Japanese investors was going perfectly until my phone vibrated on the table. I ignored it. As you were saying, Tanaka-san, our Q4 projections, I continued, keeping my professional smile. Another vibration. Taylor, my assistant, was sitting next to me taking notes, and I saw her frown at her own screen out of the corner of my eye. She shot me a quick look, but I was in the middle of closing a $42 million deal. Whatever it was, it could wait. 20 minutes later, I shook everyone's hand in the conference room and waited for the last person to hang up before turning to Taylor. Victoria Montenegro. I blinked. Judge Victoria Montenegro? The one and only. That didn't make any sense. Since our professional interaction 6 months ago, total silence. I checked my watch. 2 p.m. Tech department meeting at 3. Then a conference call with the San Francisco team at 4:30. I called her back. She picked up on the first ring. Harper. Victoria's voice was tense. Thank you for returning my call. Of course. Is everything okay? Silence on the other end. A silence too heavy for such a simple question. It's not about work, she finally said. It's personal. Do you have time to talk? In person? Personal. Victoria Montenegro, one of the most respected federal judges in New York, a woman I'd seen make millionaire lawyers stutter in court, was calling me to talk about something personal. When? Today, if you can. Sure, we can do dinner. I looked at Taylor, who was already putting dinner at 8:00 p.m. on my calendar with that scary efficiency that made her worth every penny of her salary. Is 8 o'clock okay? Perfect. There's this restaurant. I know the place. I'll see you there. I hung up and stared at the phone while telling Taylor the reason for the call. Do you want me to look into it? Taylor asked. Look into what? What a federal judge wants to discuss personally with a tech CEO on a Tuesday afternoon with less than 3 hours' notice. Taylor, you watch too many crime documentaries. It's my hobby. She was already typing away. But seriously, it's weird. You guys barely know each other. That's why I'm going to find out at dinner. The next few hours dragged on. I tried to focus on the tech meeting, but my mind kept drifting back to that call. Victoria's tone of voice, that barely hidden urgency. By 6:40 p.m., I was finally leaving the building. The meeting took way longer than expected. The restaurant was one of those hidden gems that only locals know about. Small brick walls, wooden tables stained by decades of coffee cups and conversations. I got there 10 minutes early and ordered a sparkling water with lemon and ice. Victoria showed up at exactly 8. She looked different. Still flawless, gray suit, hair tied back, perfect posture. But there was something in her eyes. Exhaustion? Worry? Something her professional armor couldn't quite hide. Harper. A firm handshake. Thank you for coming. Of course. She ordered the same thing I did. We sat in silence until the waiter walked away. I'm going to be direct, Victoria started, because I don't know any other way to do this. I need help with my daughter. That was definitely not what I expected. Your daughter? Brooklyn. She's 27. Victoria opened her bag, pulled out her phone, and showed me a photo. A beautiful blonde with a smile that looked forced even through the screen. She was at a formal event in an elegant black dress, posing next to Victoria. 3 years ago, she was in a motorcycle accident. A spinal cord injury. She's in a wheelchair now. I waited, because clearly there was more. Brooklyn was a lawyer, Columbia grad, working at my firm, brilliant career ahead of her. After the accident, Victoria paused, and for the first time, I saw the mask crack. She gave up on everything. She doesn't leave the house. She barely speaks to me. When I visit, it's like talking to a wall. I've tried therapists, support groups, specialists. Nothing works. Victoria, I'm so sorry, but I don't see how I can help. You're young, successful, you built a company from scratch. She looked me dead in the eye. And you're a lesbian. Brooklyn is too. Oh. Now it made sense. You want me to meet your daughter. I want you to be her friend. Victoria leaned forward. Not as a therapist, not as a charity project, just someone who might understand, someone her age. You probably speak the same language. It was the most bizarre request I'd ever received. Victoria, I can't just show up at your daughter's house and say, "Hi, your mom sent me here to be friends." I know it's weird. I know I have no right to ask this. She took a deep breath. But Harper, I'm desperate. She didn't die in that accident, thank God, but I lost her all the same, and I don't know how to reach her anymore. There was something in her voice, something raw and real that cut through all the layers of formality. Why me? Because when we investigated your company during the lawsuit, I read about you, about how you built everything on your own, about how you finished college and in 6 years created one of the most promising fintech startups in New York. You know what it's like to fight for something when nobody believes in you. And what does that have to do with Brooklyn? Everything. Because she stopped fighting. And maybe, just maybe, you can remind her that it's worth it. I sat there staring at this powerful woman, sitting in front of me asking for help in the most vulnerable way possible. I should have said no. It was manipulative. It was weird. And it crossed every professional and personal line imaginable. But there was something about that plea that got to me. If I do this, I said slowly, it has to be on her terms. I can't promise anything. If she wants me to leave, I'm gone. I understand. And Victoria, if she doesn't want to talk to you, maybe she isn't the only problem. I saw the judge stiffen for a second. Then surprisingly, she nodded. Maybe you're right. Victoria looked away at her untouched glass of wine, a rare moment of hesitation for someone who hands out life-changing sentences every day. The silence in the restaurant felt heavier, as if the brick walls were soaking up the weight of that confession. Maybe you're right, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper now. I've spent my whole life demanding order, Harper. In court, in my home, and when Brooklyn's world turned into a chaos of twisted metal on that road, I tried to apply that same logic. I tried to fix her life like it was a legal case. But feelings don't follow due process. I watched Victoria's hands. They were shaking, just a little. That was power tension in its purest form. A woman who dominated the judicial system of a metropolis, yet was powerless in front of her daughter's closed bedroom door. Does she feel like a case study? I asked, crossing my arms. Or maybe a broken trophy that you're ashamed to show off. Victoria flashed a spark of anger, but the fire died out quickly. I would never be ashamed of her. But she feels like I look at that wheelchair and only see what she lost, not what's left. Brooklyn was my carbon copy. Now she's an enigma I can't decode. And why do you think I, a stranger you barely know outside of board meetings, would be the key? Victoria leaned forward, her authority radiating from her like a strong perfume. Because you don't look at people with pity, Harper. I saw how you handled the prosecutors. You look at who people are, not what they seem to be. And Brooklyn needs someone who won't treat her like a motorcycle accident victim. She needs someone who will challenge her. We stayed there for another hour. Victoria told me details that weren't in the papers. The accident happened on a rainy night. Brooklyn was coming back from dinner with her then-girlfriend. The girlfriend walked away without a scratch. Brooklyn never walked again. And shortly after, the relationship fell apart, leaving an emotional wound as deep as the physical injury. She has Sunday lunch, Victoria said, shifting her tone to something more practical, almost strategic. I force her to come to my house in Brooklyn Heights every Sunday. It's an empty ritual. She sits there, barely eats, and stares at the garden like she's just waiting for time to pass. I want you to show up. At a family lunch? Victoria, that's an ambush. No, she corrected, a bitter half-smile appearing. It's an opportunity. I'll say I invited you to discuss a new philanthropic investment fund. She won't suspect a thing. Brooklyn always hated my obsession with business, but she respects intellect. Show up at noon. Please. Victoria Montenegro's please was worth more than $1 million. It was the sound of a mother trying to rescue a soul from the abyss. Sunday morning started with that golden New York light that makes everything look like a movie set. I parked my car in front of Victoria's brownstone. My heart was pounding at a rhythm I hadn't felt since my first IPO. Why was I so nervous? I'd faced Wall Street sharks before, but the idea of facing a 27-year-old in a wheelchair made me restless. Victoria opened the door. She was wearing an elegant linen dress. Her makeup was flawless, but the tension in her shoulders gave it all away. She's on the patio, Victoria whispered. Just be yourself, Harper. But for God's sake, don't mention physical therapy. I walked through the impeccable house, filled with antiques and the scent of roasted rosemary, until I reached the outdoor area. And there she was. Brooklyn was facing away from the door, turned toward a painting easel. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and she was wearing a gray hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big for her. The wheelchair was modern, matte black, but it looked like a metal prison under the sunlight. Mom, I already told you I'm not eating that asparagus risotto. Her voice was raspy, loaded with defensive sarcasm. Actually, I heard the risotto is excellent, but I'm mostly here for the wine, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Brooklyn spun her chair around with surprising agility. Her eyes, the same eyes as her mother, but with a layer of melancholy that made them look deeper, pierced right through me. She sized me up from head to toe, pausing at my expensive watch and my perfectly messy haircut. You're not the new art therapist, Brooklyn snapped, and you don't look like someone who works at the courthouse. Harper Avery, I said, holding out my hand and ignoring the hostility. CEO of Avery FinTech and apparently the uninvited guest of your Sunday. Brooklyn didn't shake my hand. She just gave me a dry smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, my mother's protege. The Wonder Woman she talks about the few times she actually tries to impress me. What's the deal? Did she offer you a tax break to come here and cheer me up? It was a direct hit. Victoria, who appeared behind me with a tray of drinks, turned pale. Brooklyn, please. Harper is a colleague and... It's fine, Victoria, I interrupted, keeping eye contact with Brooklyn. Actually, she promised me a $5,000 Chardonnay and the chance to see if the legendary Montenegro intelligence was genetic, or if it was strictly limited to the courtroom. Brooklyn arched an eyebrow. A flash of defiance sparkled in her eyes for a split second. The wine is maybe $100, tops. My mom is a cheapskate when it comes to alcohol, Brooklyn shot back, finally relaxing her shoulders. Have a seat. Let's see how long you last before you start staring at my legs and making that what a waste of youth face. Or worse, the pity face. I don't look at legs, Brooklyn, I replied, pulling up a chair and sitting right in front of her, closing the distance. I look at eyes. And yours look like they're ready to set this garden on fire at any moment. Lunch was a minefield of dry wit. Victoria tried to keep up appearances, talking about the stock market, while Brooklyn dismantled every one of her mother's comments with surgical precision. But there was something between us. Every time our eyes met, the air seemed to vibrate. By late afternoon, while Victoria was taking an urgent call from a senior judge, silence finally settled over the patio. The New York sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange. Brooklyn leaned back in her wheelchair, her guard slightly lower now that the judge wasn't there to pass judgment on every word. She picked up her brush again, but she didn't paint. She just twirled it between her paint-stained fingers. "She told you, didn't she?" Brooklyn asked, without looking at me. "About the accident, about how I was Columbia's rising star, and now I'm her renovation project." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "She mentioned the accident. But I'm not here because of your spine, Brooklyn. I'm here because, honestly, the energy in that house was suffocating me, and Victoria guaranteed me that you were the only person in this city who wasn't afraid to speak the truth." Brooklyn let out a short laugh, this time without the bitterness. She finally looked at me. "I have nothing left to lose, Harper. When you lose the use of your legs and your perfect girlfriend leaves you a month later because she can't handle the new reality, social diplomacy loses its meaning." "What were you painting?" I asked, pointing to the easel. "Chaos," she replied, turning the canvas toward me. It was abstract, a mix of cobalt blue and dark gray, but there was a force there, a tension that felt like waves before a storm. "My mother hates it. She wants me to paint calm landscapes, things that match the living room decor." "It's fascinating," I said, and I meant it. "It looks like the architecture of a system code being broken. I spend my day looking at numbers and algorithms trying to find logic in the mess. This painting has the same frequency." Brooklyn looked at me with genuine curiosity. "You know about art? I know about passion and anger, and your painting has both." From there, the hours just melted away. We didn't talk about hospitals or lawsuits anymore. We shared a mutual hatred for cliché romance movies where everything is fixed with a kiss in the rain. "Have you read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath?" she asked, her eyes glowing in a way Victoria swore had vanished. 3 times. It's my go-to when the corporate world tries to turn me into a robot. "I knew it," she whispered to herself, a smile playing on her lips, a smile that for the first time reached her eyes. "You have this aura of being totally in control, Harper, but your eyes say you'd love to set everything on fire and start from scratch." We laughed together. The sound echoed through the patio, a strange, welcome sound in that quiet house. When Victoria returned 40 minutes later, she stopped at the door, paralyzed. She saw us leaning toward each other, gesturing wildly about some obscure sci-fi soundtrack. The power tension from earlier had turned into something electric, yet soft. Brooklyn didn't look like the daughter in a wheelchair anymore. She was just a vibrant, defiant, and insanely attractive woman. "Dinner will be served soon," Victoria interrupted, her voice soft, as if she were afraid to break the spell. "I have to go, Victoria," I said, standing up, even though a part of me wanted to stay there until dawn. I looked at Brooklyn. "The offer to come over is still on the table. Not for business. I have an original 1964 record player that needs someone who actually knows the difference between Miles Davis and John Coltrane to test it out." Brooklyn held my gaze. The resistance was gone. "I'll show up, Harper. But if your coffee is bad, I'm leaving in 5 minutes. That's a risk I'm willing to take." As I left the brownstone, the New York air felt lighter. I knew Victoria had hired me for a mission, but what I felt in my chest now wasn't professional. It was the start of something dangerous, beautiful, and completely out of my control. The game wasn't just beginning. The rules had changed completely. The week at Avery FinTech went by in a blur of LED screens and board meetings, but my mind was stuck on that Sunday. I found myself checking the vinyl collection in the corner of my living room, reorganizing Miles Davis and John Coltrane as if the fate of my company depended on alphabetical order. Brooklyn wasn't just a mission handed to me by Judge Victoria Montenegro. She was a frequency I had finally tuned into. On Wednesday night, the doorbell of my Upper West Side apartment rang. When I opened the door, Brooklyn was there. She wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. She wore soft leather pants and a burgundy silk shirt that brought out the depth in her eyes. She looked powerful, despite, or maybe because of, the matte black wheelchair she was now maneuvering with defiant confidence. "Has the coffee improved? Or am I calling an Uber in 5 minutes?" was the first thing she said, a half smile playing on her lips. "Come in, Brooklyn. The coffee is hand-picked Arabica, but I think the wine will go better with Coltrane," I replied, stepping aside. My apartment was the opposite of Victoria's brownstone. Where her mother's house was full of heavy antiques and invisible rules, mine was minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the Manhattan skyline and a sound system that was my only true luxury. The first 2 hours were magic. Brooklyn explored my bookshelf like she was reading my soul. We laughed about how we both hated the endings of certain classics and argued for 20 minutes over the best jazz album for a rainy New York night. "You have a signed copy of The Bell Jar?" she asked, her long, thin fingers touching the spine with a reverence that made me hold my breath. "A graduation gift I gave myself when I cleared my first million," I confessed. I wanted to remind myself that even inside the bell jar, you can still see the light. Brooklyn turned to me. The distance between us was minimal. I could feel her heat, the scent of oil paint that had become her trademark. For a moment, time stopped. The invisible love Victoria wanted her daughter to feel again was right there, floating between us, palpable and dangerous. "Harper, she started, her voice dropping to a lower, more intimate tone. But fate, or maybe the past, had other plans. The door to my apartment swung open with a bang. I hadn't locked it, expecting a Thai food delivery, but the person who walked in wasn't the delivery guy. "Harper, you're not answering your phone," and I decided that the voice was like a whip. Chloe. My ex-girlfriend, a socialite and model whose beauty was only surpassed by her ability to cause drama, stopped in the middle of the room. Her eyes swept the place and landed on Brooklyn. The power tension in the room shifted instantly. Chloe looked at the wheelchair with a mix of shock and a second later, a cruel disdain that made my blood boil. "Oh." Chloe let out a dry laugh, walking toward us with calculated steps. "So this is why you've been so busy. You traded our dinners at Nobu for charity?" "Chloe, get out of here right now," I said, my voice coming out in the low, lethal tone I usually use to fire incompetent executives. Brooklyn stiffened. I watched the light in her eyes go out, replaced by the armor of coldness she had worn on Sunday. She backed her chair up a step, creating distance. "Charity?" Brooklyn repeated the word, her voice dripping with defensive sarcasm. "So that's how you describe me to your girlfriend, Harper? The poor judge's daughter who needs company?" "She's not my girlfriend, Brooklyn, and I never said that," I snapped, desperately trying to control the disaster. Chloe, realizing she'd found a wound, smirked. It was a predator's smile. She stepped closer to Brooklyn, faking a sympathy that was pure poison. "Oh, honey, don't be upset. Harper has always had this savior complex. She loves fixing broken things, buildings, companies, people. She probably thinks you're her new project for the quarter." Chloe's hit was surgical. She knew exactly where Brooklyn was vulnerable, the fear of being nothing more than a burden or an object of pity. Continua asim. "Chloe, that's enough!" I stepped between them, glaring at my ex. "You lost the right to walk in here the day you cheated on me with that nobody. Get out before I call building security and make sure your face is banned from every club in this city." Chloe arched an eyebrow, shrugged with an irritating elegance, and looked at Brooklyn one last time. "Good luck, cutie. Just a piece of advice. Don't get too attached. Once she realizes you can't be fixed, she'll move on to the next startup." With the click of her heels, Chloe left, behind a trail of expensive perfume and complete emotional destruction. The silence that followed was devastating. Brooklyn was staring into space, her hands gripping the rims of her wheelchair so hard her knuckles turned white. "Brooklyn, listen." I tried to step closer, but she backed away sharply. "She's right, isn't she?" Brooklyn looked at me, and this time there was no melancholy, only cold fury. "My mother hired you. How much is she paying you, Harper? Or is this just a political favor for when Avery FinTech needs a friendly judge?" "It's nothing like that. I went to your house because I wanted to." Brooklyn spun her chair toward the door. "I thought you were different. I thought that, for the first time in years, someone was actually seeing me. But you were just following a schedule." "Brooklyn, stop. If I were just following a schedule, I would have left on Sunday after 10 minutes. I stayed for hours. I invited you here, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about that conversation on the porch." She stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "The problem, Harper, is that I don't know what's real anymore and what's the savior complex your ex mentioned. And honestly, I don't have the mental energy to find out." She left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty apartment like a gunshot. I kicked the coffee table, sending the jazz records crashing to the floor. I stayed up all night, staring at the Manhattan skyline. Brooklyn's old secret, the pain of her ex-girlfriend's rejection, had been ripped open by Chloe, and I was the one to blame for letting that interference in. The next morning, I didn't go to the office. I went to the only person who could help me understand how to fix what seemed unfixable. I knocked on Victoria Montenegro's brownstone door at 8 a.m. When she opened it, she looked startled. "Harper? What happened?" "Brooklyn didn't come home last night. She went straight to her painting studio and—" "Victoria," I interrupted, walking into the house without permission. "I messed everything up, but I'm going to fix it, and for that, I need you to tell me the truth about what happened the night of the accident. Everything. No legal omissions." Victoria hesitated, the authority of a judge fighting the anguish of a mother. But seeing the desperation in my eyes, a desperation that wasn't about a deal, but about a person, she finally gave in. "The accident wasn't just a twist of fate, Harper," Victoria said, sitting heavily in her armchair. "There was blackmail involved, and that's why Brooklyn shut herself off from the world." Victoria took a long time to speak. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy with everything that would never fit into a legal record. "The accident wasn't just an accident," she repeated, her voice breaking. "It was a consequence." She pressed her hands together, as if she were trying to stop something from escaping. Brooklyn was being blackmailed. My stomach churned. Blackmailed? How? Victoria closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, there was no judge there. Only a tired mother. Months before the accident, Brooklyn discovered irregularities inside my own office, an aide involved in a kickback scheme. She confronted the wrong person. She thought she was protecting justice, and she ended up becoming a target. The air felt thin. "Did you cover it up?" I asked quietly. Victoria shook her head, wounded. "No. I reported it. But before I could, someone leaked Brooklyn's personal information. Address, routine, private photos, her ex-girlfriend was used as her weak spot. Everything made sense at once. The sudden exit, the abandonment, the silence. The night of the accident," Victoria continued, "Brooklyn was coming back from a tense meeting. She had received an anonymous message saying that if she didn't convince her mother to drop it, more things would come out. She was nervous. It was raining. She sped up." Victoria crumbled. She survived, but she lost her body, and she lost her trust in everything. In me, in justice, in herself. I stood up, not out of anger, out of a decision. She thinks she was disposable, I said. Not just to her ex, to the whole system. And now, to me. Victoria looked up at me, pleading. Can you still reach her? Not with promises, I replied, and not with speeches, only with the truth. Brooklyn's painting studio was in a converted warehouse in the Lower East Side. A raw place, with high windows and the smell of solvent and freedom. The kind of place no one enters by accident. When I arrived, she was alone. She was painting with violence. Every brushstroke was almost a strike. Dark blue paint dripped down the canvas like rain. If you're here because of my mother, she said without looking, you can leave. I'm not. She stopped. I turned her chair toward me, not with force, but with firmness. She looked at me, ready to fight. I know about the blackmail, I said. The accident. The ex. Everything. The color drained from her face. Who told you? Your mother. And before you say anything, I didn't defend anyone. Not her. Not you. I just listened. Brooklyn swallowed hard. So, now you know, she whispered. I didn't just lose my legs. I lost the illusion that being righteous protects you. I know, I replied. And that's why Chloe hurt you so much. Because she spoke exactly with the voice you already have inside. She turned her face away. I'm not a project, Harper. I know. I'm not charity. I know. And I don't need to be saved. Brooklyn, I sat down in front of her, staying at the same eye level. I don't want you perfect. I want you real. And if you decide never to trust me again, I'll respect that. But don't put me in the same category as the people who broke you. The silence lasted an eternity. Then Brooklyn took a deep breath. Why did you stay? Because when you laughed that Sunday, it was the most honest thing I'd seen in months. Her eyes filled with tears, not out of weakness, but out of exhaustion. I'm tired, Harper, she whispered. Tired of being strong. Then don't be. Not with me. She broke down. Not in dramatic sobs, in something deeper. A quiet, old cry that finally found a place to exist. I didn't hug her right away. I waited. When Brooklyn leaned toward me, it was a slow, hesitant movement. Not like someone asking for help, but like someone testing if the ground was still there. I reached out my hand slowly, touching her forearm first, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. She didn't pull back. Brooklyn looked up. Her eyes, still wet with tears, met mine with a raw, almost frightening vulnerability. There was no defiance there, no irony, just truth. Don't go, she said, not as a plea, but as a fragile realization. I won't, I replied. I'm staying. The kiss didn't happen right away. It was preceded by a short pause, that split second where two people decide in silence to cross a line together. When our lips finally met, it was a soft, gentle kiss, without urgency. A kiss that didn't want to take anything, just to be there. Brooklyn closed her eyes like someone finally letting out a breath after holding it for a long time. The world didn't fix itself in that instant, but something settled. And for the first time since the accident, Brooklyn wasn't being strong. She was being human, with me. The months that followed weren't easy. Brooklyn didn't go back to being who she was. She became someone new. She started exhibiting her paintings, first in small galleries, then larger ones. Victoria left the court a few months later, officially for personal reasons, and she finally learned how to listen to her daughter. And me? I learned how to slow down. I learned that power isn't about invading. It's about staying. On a winter night, we were in my apartment. Jazz was playing softly. The city was breathing outside. Brooklyn held my hand, this time by choice. "You know," she said, "I'm still afraid." "Me too." She smiled, a real full smile. "Then stay." And I stayed. If this story touched you, maybe it's not because of the romance. Maybe it's because you've also been reduced to a broken version of yourself. Maybe it's because someone tried to fix you before even listening to you. Or because at some point, they looked at you with pity, when all you wanted was to be seen for who you really are. This story isn't about a wheelchair. It's about what happens after the fall, when the world moves on, but you're still standing there trying to figure out who's left. It's about being exhausted from having to be strong all the time. It's about the fear of trusting again, about the silent pain of being treated like a project, a problem, or an exception, and not like a person. If you saw yourself in Brooklyn, know this: you don't need to go back to who you were before. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to be whole to be worthy of love. And if you saw yourself in Harper, maybe the lesson is different. Loving isn't about invading, saving, or insisting. Loving is staying when the other person chooses to come close. Sometimes the most powerful gesture isn't a hug. It's waiting. If you're going through an invisible grief, a life-changing shift, a body that doesn't respond like it used to, or a heart that's just tired of defending itself, you're not late. You're not wrong. You're not broken. You are still here. And that is enough to start over, in your own time, your own way, with someone who truly sees you. If this story held your attention until now, it wasn't by accident. Leave a like right now. It tells the algorithm, and the person writing this, that human, deep, and real stories still have a place. Subscribe to the channel, not just to consume content, but to follow narratives that don't treat pain like a show or people like problems to be fixed. Here, we talk about love and pain. If something in this story felt like you, let me know in the comments. You don't have to explain everything. Sometimes just saying "I felt this" is enough. And if you know someone who's tired of being strong all the time, share this. It might be the silent push they needed.